Now, Labour has shifted its approach to free schools. The Shadow's Education Secretary Tristram Hunt says a future Labour government will support good parent-led schools. He'd previously labelled free schools vanity projects. Our political correspondent Carol Walker reports.
Free schools are a flagship policy for the Prime Minister and his Education Secretary Michael Gove. 174 have been set up since the coalition came to power, with far greater control over their own budgets, curriculums and staff. At the last election, Labour condemned the idea. This was the newly elected MP Tristram Hunt in 2010.
£250 million allocated for building schools for the future is under threat from Michael Gove and the Department for Education to fund these vanity projects for yummy mummies in West London and underemployed professionals to set up their Swedish schools.
Now he's the new Shadow Education Secretary, and the tone is rather different.
I've got one message for you this morning and one message for viewers, which is that if you are a group of parents, a group of social entrepreneurs, teachers interested in setting up a school in areas where you need new school places, then the Labour government will be on your side. We are in favour.
Free schools. You're in favour of free schools.
We are in favour of enterprise and innovation.
Labour says its policy hasn't changed. It won't accept the current system. It says local authorities should have a role to ensure free schools are set up in areas of real need. They have no say at the moment. Labour says teachers must be qualified. Currently, free schools can hire who they want. And Labour wants greater financial transparency.
This is the same old Labour policy. This is what they've been saying for months and is no different from his predecessor. Exactly, almost to the word, what he said. Free schools will only be allowed in specific circumstances, in specific areas, with a whole load of bureaucracy attached.
Free schools remain controversial. The Al Medina Muslim Free School in Derby closed for a while after Ofsted said it was inadequate in all areas.
Why don't you wait?
Others, like the West London Free School, have proved popular with parents, and Labour say they won't close down good free schools. Carol Walker, BBC News.
With me now is Frances Gilbert, a teacher who's also from the Local Schools Network, which is a campaigning and blogging site which is supportive of non-selective local schools. Frances, thank you very much for coming in. So Labour is signalling a more hands-off approach than we might have expected. Why do you think that might be?
Well, I think they perceive that it's popular with some parents, and I think they also realise that in certain areas, free schools have injected a bit of creativity and difference into the system. But they're also realising, aren't they, that too many of these schools are you know, just a law unto themselves, and so there is a role for the local authority to rein in schools, and they're not going to be setting up schools where there's no demand for them. So only in areas where there's a need for a new school will they be allowed to set up. So that's quite different from what's the situation at the moment, where we've got a lot of free schools that are just being set up in areas where they're just not needed at all.
There have been concerns about one or two free schools because of the teaching standards, admittedly. But could you really have a free school with local education authority involvement? It seems like a contradiction.
It is a bit, isn't it? And I think that, you know, Labour are playing a tricky game because I think they're perceiving that it's possibly popular with the electorate, the idea of free schools, but they're also aware that, you know, you actually do have to have local control and over what's going on in a school. Otherwise, you know, you can just have a free-for-all like we've seen in some schools recently, where just people are doing things that are completely unacceptable in a state school.
Well, yes, exactly. We can't say at the moment, can we, that every single state school in the country is outstanding. So is there good practice? And if so, what kind of good practice might state schools learn from maybe a nearby free school?
Well, I suppose the free schools I've got excited about are the more progressive ones that are thinking outside the box and are, you know, not...
But what does that look like?
Yeah, what does it look like? Something like Peter Hyman's school in Newham is, you know, a more progressive school that's trying to go beyond just drilling kids for exams. I know as a teacher myself that the exam system we've got is just not delivering the goods, and we need schools that are going to really educate the whole child and be a bit more sort of forward thinking.
But if you've got an exam system that's at fault, if it is the exam system that's at fault, schools have got to teach towards that, because that's the only thing we've got.
It is, and so free schools are not actually that free in a way anyway, are they? They've got to do the GCSEs like all of us and the A-levels, but I suppose they have got a little bit more freedom to kind of manipulate the curriculum a bit, but so have academies too. You know, I teach in academy and we can, you know, play around and suspend the national curriculum if we want to. So, you know, it's all a bit of a kind of tricky area. The big issue, I think, is we need to reform the exam system so that it's really going to motivate all of our pupils to really want to learn. And as we've seen in the report this week from the OECD, that, you know, literacy and numeracy standards are just not good enough in school leavers.
How accessible to everyone in a local area are free schools, in your opinion?
Well, they're not, and this is a thing that at Local Schools Network we've really campaigned against. You know, that some schools are just clearly socially segregating off certain groups.
Not all, though.
Not all, yeah, and there's pockets of good practice, but it's only in the kind of behest of the governing body. If they, you know, decide to be kind of open-ended and let all the local people in, they will. But there's loads of ways they can stack the system so that they just admit the particular group that they want to let in. So, for example, in Tower Hamlets, in my own area, there's a school in the Isle of Dogs that admits less than 5% of students on free school meals, despite the fact that it's an area where 60–70% of the pupils on free school meals. So it's clearly just a place where children of wealthier people go, and that's totally unacceptable. And I hope that Labour will deal with that situation, you know, and have a fairer admissions system, because we really need that.
Francis Gilbert from the Local Schools Network, thank you very much.